Hello and welcome to Gabbett Media, I'm Grant Abbott, and today we're going to be painting rocks, dirt and ground-based materials, basically painting in the bottom of our island. I'll be going into detail about how you can paint these things, with lots of tips and tricks along the way. I've done a bit of experimenting and come out with something slightly different, but the workflow is still the same and you can learn lots from following along. So if you've just joined us, we've painted the top of our island. If I quickly go to object mode so we can see that. And there's probably still a bit of work to do, but once we've got the ground painted as well, we can start merging the two together. Now with my object, I have got a vertex group, so I can easily select by going into edit mode and select my dirt. And that will isolate those faces when I go to texture paint mode and have that button tick there. I'll click on my brush and go to the active tool workspace settings. I've got my brush strength on 0.2. I'll change it back to mixed, and I haven't got any texture masks or unusual strokes, so it's all at default at the moment. So the first thing to do is to go in and kind of outline your areas and shapes. So choose a nice dark color, just test it out, see what it looks like. And I'm going to go for a bit more strength this time, so 0.4. And I'm going to use my tablet's pen pressure on both the strength and the radius, so I can get some nice fine lines. So we're trying to break up the stone and give it some shape. So try and follow patterns where you can actually see you've already put some dark lines down. And we're just trying to outline shapes of our rocks. Try and generally get them all sort of in the same rough direction. So I'm going up to the side like this, because rock formations tend to follow a line in some way. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you want a big patch of darkness, just scrub it in like this for the moment. We'll go back to that and fill it in later. So from a distance you should sort of be able to see the outline of your rock. Be careful not to make them too uniform like this. It's possibly a bit too much. It looks like there's big rocks stacked on top of each other, so break them up where you can and need to. So you can see I'm sort of following a general direction, going sort of across like this all the way round. And you can see from a distance at the moment, it's offering a bit of detail to our rocks. Be experimental. You learn from your mistakes with these things. And all the time I'm trying to do new things. Even when I'm doing these tutorials, I'm thinking, well, I'll try that out for the moment as well. See how that goes. Okay, so I've got a basic outline there. Now we want to add a bit of shape to our rocks. So I'll get a screen brush for this one. And I'll change the color, bringing it a bit brighter. Maybe choose one of my colours over here to start with, and somewhere around there. Fairly nice and big brush. And I'll lower the strength now, so to about 0.3. And I'm just going to go across these as if the light is hitting them in certain areas. So it's coming from the top here and hitting patches of our rocks. And being fairly random again, as always. So we've got now sort of blobby rock formations in the bottom there. Let's go to the multiply brush now and choose a darker colour, but a different colour as well, not just a darker tone, but an actual different colour. Maybe come down to here a bit, and in these shaded areas give them some variation. And this should act like the light's hitting a surface here and therefore give it depth. That's the thinking anyway. Follow your lines, of course, that you've already created. Now it looks like I'm kind of destroying what I've got underneath. The base was just a starting point to give us an initial texture that we could build upon. So you can see now that's looking fairly sort of rocky. And we've got some bits sticking out, some not sticking out, and so forth. It's coming together. Now we want to go somewhere sort of in the middle. So find a natural colour and sample a colour from here that's sort of in the middle, and again with a slightly different tone. Change your brush to mix, of course, There we go, and let's see what that looks like. And now we're trying to build up some substance to our rocks. So just offer a different colour, different tone to another side of the rock. So you're kind of looking for 3 different tones in terms of lightness, as if the light's sort of bouncing around, and you've got some shade in there, but also vary the actual colour as well. So let's look back and see how that's doing. I'm going to turn off the grid, we don't really need that in there. And it's looking sort of lumpy bumpy, rocky. It's kind of working. It's a bit too sticky outy at the moment, so there's a bit too much in the highlights. I'll leave that for now, and then we'll work on that as we go along and maybe bring down those tones if we have to. So now that we've done that, we can add a bit of detail to our rock. Choose a nice bright colour, so I'll choose this one and just bring it up slightly. Bring my brush right down for some, let's bring the actual strength up. So across those highlights, as if the rock's got some sort of formation. Let's move back and see how that looks. Not quite there yet. So follow these edges that you can see here, that you've already created. That's a bit better than these ones here, that wasn't so great. Can you see I'm just going across those edges, trying to highlight as if it's glancing off a very edgy ridge bit here. Hopefully that makes sense. So wherever 2 textures meet, I'm trying to create a tiny highlight. I actually want some shade from the grass, so later on I will actually put some darkness across here, so the grass is overlapping slightly, so I want some shadow in there as well. This bit certainly needs a bit of work, but we're sort of getting there with the other bits. They look a bit rocky and interesting. It's really not blending in well with the grass at the moment, but we'll get there with that. Now it seems quite flat, and generally we want this bit to catch the light more than the very bottom bit. So you make the bottom bits darker and the top bits here lighter. So let's go to our multiply brush and choose a fairly dark colour. Bring the strength right down to 0.1 now, and a nice big brush. And then you can really gently bring up the darkness at the bottom here. Bring up the darkness, that doesn't make sense. Bring down the tone at the bottom here. So look for sort of patches where you want it to push inwards. So maybe there's some around here. I can make my brush a bit smaller and try and bring that in. There's natural patches around the place, but mainly working on the bottom edge along here. If I know that stone's going to be there, I can certainly add a bit of shade in there as well. So it's slowly bringing out those rocks. It might be looking a bit more rocky than my original, but I'm kind of just showing you how you can make rocks really more than making a final finished piece, and experimenting for my own benefit as well. I'm trying to figure out the easiest and quickest way to make these things, because I spend kind of hours going over and over things, but I want quick workflows so I can teach them to you guys. So this is kind of an experiment in terms of workflow for me. So trying to do it in steps and stages. Okay, how are we looking? Always look back from a bit of a distance. It's kind of working. I want to get that shadow in with the grass now, so I'm going to work on that. So going around, getting that shadow in. I don't have to worry about going over the grass at this stage. Let's see how that's looking. I may be going too far, but I think we're okay. And the main thing with this is to experiment, practice, not worry too much about the final outcome. I doubt for many this is going to be a project where you're selling it or anything like that. So really experiment, push the boundaries, and you'll learn so much more if you do that. Obviously it's slightly different for me because I'm doing a tutorial, but I noticed the numbers for this aren't particularly high, to be honest, in terms of viewers, so I can experiment as well, not worry too much if people watch it or not. This is for the die-hard fans who love the text painting. Now just going in around these rocks as well. Might want a bit of highlights here actually, where it comes out of the river, even though it's obviously completely fake. The idea of a river being cut off like this, but still we want highlights to imagine that there is a complete harsh line there. Okay, let's again have another look around. May have gone a bit too dark in places, but it's alright. We can bring up the middle section slightly. So with the screen brush, choose a nice bright colour. I feel like my palette is fairly dull actually. I probably need to add a few of these in. I'll add this bright one here and go up even higher and add a yellow in as well. A bit more saturation. Okay, try this. I've still got 0.1 on. I don't want to take too much away, so if I go across all that, you can see it's adding too much to the underside there. Just watch out for that. Maybe a smaller brush will help here. That one doesn't make much sense really, so there's a bit of a problem there. I might get my smear brush and just smear that out, because this line going through here doesn't quite look right. And this top highlight there, really there should be a highlight more going across here where it catches the light, like so. Makes a bit more sense anyway. Let's get that smear brush and smear that bit out like that. It's a bit better. So close in it doesn't look like much, but when we get to about here we're starting to see the effects and it looks okay. I think there's too much variation in the textures. I feel like I didn't go far enough on the top here and now I've gone too far at the bottom. But again, it's experimenting and trying things out. Now with 0.05, I'm just going to go round the middle. Maybe I'll choose a slightly reddy, orangey tone for this one, just to bring it out a bit more. Just flatten it out slightly. I'm starting to whisper a bit again, aren't I? Must stop doing that. Okay, so it's flattened out slightly, that's helping. And it's kind of working. They do look like rocks, they're working, but they're looking a bit too lumpy really. I've gone too rocky. But it's kind of interesting, and I think it's a good lesson anyway. I would say that, because I'm the teacher. If we do want to flatten it out a bit more, we can just go over some of these areas that are a bit too deep with a screen brush, just to help us. I think these areas are a bit too much. So we've gone kind of a second phase of detail here, and for many people I would say that's enough to practice and find out new techniques, but you can go a stage further and keep going with tiny little details that add more character. I'm going to go to the multiply brush for this. I do use the multiply and screen brush a lot. I find that's just the best way with Blender. It's not how I would do things normally if I were, well, let's change the colour, I'm not multiplying much there. If I was in something like Photoshop, I'll just up the strength, I would choose to sample colours, and I'd be using the Alt key to sample and then use that colour. So but here we have to press S, sample, choose the colour down here, so it's a bit of a faff really, whereas Photoshop has a much better way of doing things for that sort of thing. Oh, I did actually manage to sample the colour there by accident. So now I'm giving the rocks more shape and substance. This time with the multiply brush. Following those highlights a bit. And it's turning out quite nicely. I feel like, again, there's still too much shape to it, but it's quite fun really. There's not much going on in there really. Ooh, that's too much though. If you want to tidy any bits up, then you can get the smudge brush. It's not the best way again, I often say that, It can be quite damaging in some places, but it does help to tidy up some messy bits. In this case, it sort of helps if you get onto a dark bit and push it across to a light bit. That can really help you out. I want to highlight this edge more, so I'm going to go to my screen brush. Get a nice light brush again, and just sort of highlight this edge coming out here, as if the rocks are sticking out in that place. It's not quite working that. I'm actually going to smudge these upwards a bit more. And that's a tiny bit better. It still needs a lot of work, really. Okay, so it's quite fun, but it still looks a bit too much of a contrast between the two, and I can flatten that out fairly easily, but I'm hoping you get the point. Again, we can just go to the multiply brush or the screen brush, vice versa. Probably the screen in this case, and then just bring some of these dark bits in. Just go over the dark bits so these pieces don't stand out too much. Taking care not to go over the light bits to make them lighter. Okay, so I'll just do a few in here as well. So it's quite a simple way of bringing those areas out. We could do with a dark bit in there, really, a darker bit, in fact, in there. So get them multiplied. Nice dark brush. Probably a bit too much. Now the last point is to try and get some minor details in there. So grab your screen brush, get some little highlights with an actual light brush. Let's get one of these stones again. In fact, I'm doing this the opposite way round. Doesn't matter too much, you can do it either way. Then go to your multiply brush. I usually start with the multiply. And then have sort of little rock formations or little stones that have made their way into little cracks. Like so. That's far too yellowy though, so we'll go back to the screen. And remember, the top part is the highlight. And it's far too bright as well, so I'll multiply that back down. There we go, so a tiny little stone in there. We'll get a very tiny highlight. It's kind of working. So put a few of those around. In fact, I might want that stone a bit more grey. So a new tip this time, we'll go to the colour. You can actually completely change the colour of an object without changing its tone, as long as you're in the middle. And let's make our brush the same size as it. Just draw over it. It just changes the colour and doesn't influence the tonal balance, so the lights and darks. It's very light though, so a bit of multiply on there. There. So a few little rocks around the place like that. Look for crevices where they might sit. So hopefully you can get an idea of how to add those sort of details. The last bit I'm going to do today is to start blending these two together. So let's turn off the brush that isolates the textures. I'm going to simply go to the smear brush for now with a fairly small brush and just bring this down. So just start merging them into each other like this, very simply. turn the strength up a touch, and maybe the brush up a touch. So just to start off with, merge them together like this. It's going all the way around, so the colours sort of overlap a bit more. And already you can sort of see the benefits of doing that, hopefully. Now I'm using a new tablet today, just for testing it out. It's a very cheap mobile phone type tablet from Huion. The Huion HS64, so it's quite a cheap one, somewhere around £30-ish, or $30 in fact, about the same in dollars as pounds. It's not too bad, it's not too bad. Obviously I prefer a screen tablet or pen display, for obvious reasons. It's just a lot easier. But it just goes to show it doesn't really make that much difference with your tablet. As long as you've got something that's got pressure sensitivity and doesn't sort of lag or anything like that, you should be fine. So I've gone all the way around with that, and suddenly it looks a bit more integrated. Now we need to go in with our different style of brushes, the multiply. If we add a sort of mid-grey, then it shouldn't affect the colour too much, in terms of it should use the colour that's there already. And we can sort of paint in some shadow just by quickly going around and kind of drawing underneath it. Being fairly rough at the moment, just for speed. You might want to take a bit more time and experiment with these things a bit more. But you can sort of see the effect it's having. It's working reasonably well. Okay, so we've got a bit of an overlap there. Looks a bit more detailed. Might be a bit over the top just around here. We can highlight the grass as well, so it stands out like it's catching the light. Now I've just got a light screen brush at the moment. See how that looks. I might want to go a bit more bright and vivid with my green though. So fairly big brush to start with. So it's catching that light around the edge there. That's not too bad. Not sure I'm liking my rocks so much, but they're okay. I think they're possibly a bit too lumpy and rocky for this particular model. For that grass, I think I'll go back to my speckled brush. So with the stroke method, not the texture mask, but the stroke method, use the dots, turn the jitter up. Let's quickly see how that looks. Brush down a bit and change my colour a bit more. I might even go more green. Brush size down even further. Just to add a bit of variation into these colours. Might be going too far. I do like to experiment though. Yeah, there's a bit of stretch there, I've got to watch out for that. Well, it's kind of working. I probably still need a bit of work on the colour variations within here. I still think there's a bit too much contrast in those sort of areas. And again, to sort that out, it's just going across the dark areas with the screen brush will lighten those areas up and therefore not make it too lumpy like it is at the moment. To make sure you don't get any colour changes on your screen brush, keep it nice and central. And I might want a touch more dark green around the bottom of my grass, as if it's underlapping itself. So there we go, a base of our bridge over the river scene. You can find other sessions about creating the beams and the stones, and I'll put links in the description, put that at the beginning. So I hope you're enjoying this series still. I know there's only a few left, but I'm going to continue and do the water next time. So thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with it, and I'll see you next time.